All good, mate.
ESBR boxing. We're back. Myself and Owen McKenzie. We are here in review mode. We're reviewing the fight that's just taken place between Nick Ball and Sam Goodman. Controversial to some, no doubt, which we'll unpick here as well. Before we do that, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, we've got a lot of reviews, previews, big fight breakdowns, all your boxing needs under one roof. But Owen, as mentioned, we're here to react to Nick Ball's victory, unanimous decision victory over Sam Goodman. First thing I want to talk to you about, though, is the scorecards, Owen. We've got 117, 111, we've got 118, 110, we've got 115, 113. First and foremost, can I get your thoughts on those scorecards, please? And then after that, we'll unpick some other issues.
Disgusting. How anyone can sit and see that fight as 7 or 8 rounds is just absolutely baffling. Great fight. I thought Sam Goodman started very well. I thought the opening round, Nick Ball's bodywork was very good, and then he just seemed to abandon that. I thought Goodman took over, won the majority of the mid rounds, and then it was just a bit of a tear up. I personally had Goodman winning by one. Um, I've seen different group chats and on socials people having it a draw, 1 round either way, which you can't begrudge anyone if they're seeing it that way. But 8 rounds is just it's absolutely disgusting. It's a big night for Sam Goodman. He missed out on the two Inoue fights. He put in an unbelievable performance, fighting on the inside, keeping it a distance, trading, taking some shots. So yeah, not many words other than an absolute disgrace. And I don't want to say it's a stain on boxing because we see this all the time, but in a close fight like that, how you can score at 8 rounds, that judge should never be allowed near a boxing ring again in his life.
Um, yeah, so I was just reacting to that as well. I agree with you as well. I think I suppose like the card I was following, obviously while watching it, and viewers are following it as well as Andy Lee's scorecard. Shout out to Andy Lee, obviously friend of the channel. He had obviously had Nick Ball one up going to the last round, and I think to be honest with you, like as a kind of sense check, they made the comment on comms as well that it felt like it was hard to necessarily score it round by round, but as a sense check, it felt close. It felt like going into sort of the championship rounds, actually maybe the Goodman was edging it. So really, like Nick Ball, I think, from my opinion, did actually come on strong in those championship rounds. Maybe got it by 1 or 2 rounds, but I agree with you. I think scorecard to give the other guys got 2 rounds and 3 rounds to Goodman was really poor officiating. And again, you just think it kind of is where boxing takes the sort of gloss away from itself really because we should be sitting there talking about a fantastic performance from Goodman could come again, a great sort of title fight really on a card, that like that, and you sit there and go, actually now we're sitting there talking about how sort of not corrupt, but how kind of like incompetent maybe it was for the judges
Mm-hmm.
there. So yeah, not a fan of that either. But let's talk up a bit about Nick Ball, obviously the victor, British interest. We go on with a British world champion, 37 years. The count continues. Obviously, that record was under threat tonight. But you look at obviously Nick Ball, the last couple of fighters that he's fought, TJ Johanny, obviously, Ronnie Rios, Sam Goodman here. Some people have been somewhat underwhelmed by those as opposition. So my question to you really is, do you want to see Nick? Where do you want to see Nick Ball next? Do you want to see maybe a unification fight? Obviously, got Espinosa, Angelo Leo, names like Fulton kicking around that division. Do you want to see that for him, or do you see a different fight for him next?
Um, it's a weird one because from a personal point of view, I think it would be nice to see him unify. He's got that one draw on his record where you could argue he actually won that fight, so he should already be unified. But then the game nowadays, if we're talking casuals, does the likes of Espinoza and Angelo Leo, do they sell? No. Does Naira Inoue at Anfield sell? Absolutely, without a doubt. I think that's the fight the majority of people want to see. Sam Goodman was booked in twice to fight Inoue. And I personally, myself, like I say, I haven't seen much of Goodman. I know most people won't have seen much of Goodman. And he's put one hell of a fight on there. So I think considering he was meant to be fighting Inoue twice, it's Frank Warren mentioned it as well in the build up before the ring walks with Adi Oladipo as well. So I think it's Inoue. Nick Ball, he's been a world champion. Well, he is a world champion for a decent period of time now. So I'm sure, as much as he'd like other titles, I'm sure he'd like that huge paycheck, and the biggest paycheck for him is Naira Inoue.
Oh, and let me take you somewhere. Let me put you in a situation right now. You've sat through the undercard. You're sat ringside at Anfield. You've sung, you'll never walk alone, whatever. You've got your drink there next to you. The ring walks have happened. The fight's about to take place. Next, who would you actually have winning that fight? Judging from what you've just seen from Nick Ball there, you've seen obviously Inoue come up. A lot of people said, Nick Ball's obviously the more natural at the weight. But would you make Nick Ball favourite going into that fight? Would you predict a Nick Ball victory, or do you think Inoue would have too much to beat him? And if he does beat him, do you think he'd be able to stop Nick Ball?
For the loyal ESBR viewers, they'll know I've said all along if Inoue comes to the weight, Inoue still sweeps up. I think this is the final hurdle for him in terms of weight. I think if he goes past featherweight, it'd be absolutely ridiculous. I said it before, and then watching that, the way Goodman fought, the way he was catching Nick Ball, I don't want to say it's weird. He wasn't desperate, but there was times where sort of like round 3, round 4, where I thought Nick Ball looked a bit one-dimensional. He had a very tight guard, almost when Sam Goodman would step in, knowing obviously that Nick Ball being the smaller man physically has to step in. It was like, right, overload on the overhand rights and try and catch him. So I think the way he fought, some of the body shots he was taking, some nice uppercuts as well from Goodman. I think Inoue, there was in some of those angles, I think Inoue would take him out. I think I would back a Inoue stoppage. I think Nick Ball would have to just run at Inoue and just put a frantic pace on and hope that he can't go to rounds 11, rounds 12 that deep with a ridiculous pace. But yeah, after watching that, it's even more certain in my mind that it's a super fight from a British perspective, but Naira Inoue stops Nick Ball. I know you'd probably push me for a round, probably round 7, round 8, round that mark. I think Nick Ball would try and push the pace, and some brutal body shots from Naira Inoue would get the job done.
I wasn't actually going to push you for a round because I was too aroused by the thought of Inoue winning at Anfield and just the mood in the stadium at the end of that one. But I think I actually have to totally agree with you. I think from what we've just seen there as well, I think Inoue would have far too much actually for Nick Ball. I think obviously he got caught multiple times by Sam Goodman there, but I think with all due respect, we can probably agree that Inoue hits harder than Sam Goodman. I think he'd catch Nick Ball quite frequently. I think also obviously there'd be a kind of the physical advantages Nick Ball would have would obviously be more sort of denser at the weight. But I think if you look at the guys that lined up like height wise, reach wise, I don't think you'd have obviously that over Inoue either. So for me, I would have Inoue as convincing sort of a favourite going into that fight. And I think like you as well, I think the fight gets stopped, and I think it gets stopped somewhere sort of 6-8. So we're in agreement, we're in alignment with that. But just one more comment, I suppose, about the featherweight division and like the other champions, obviously that are in there. If that Inoue fight doesn't happen next, obviously we've talked on different people have talked on the channel about maybe Espinosa being too big for Nick Ball, or maybe is Nick Ball second best fighter in the division? Angelo Leo, is he second best? Fulton, where are they kicking around? I mean, were you to have Nick Ball against any of those names, do you see him becoming possibly a unified champion at this stage, or do you think maybe with some of the fights he's had recently, there's almost like there is focus on Inoue that almost like a level has dropped a bit, where you actually wouldn't make him favourite against some of the champions in that division? How do you see it at featherweight?
I think in terms of divisions, it's probably one of the, considering the bouts are spread out, it's one of the more closely matched. I don't think he'd necessarily be favourite in any of them fights. Some bookies may, some bookies won't. I think the Angelo Leo fight would just be a banger. I think that would be the best fight out of the lot. I think we'd see head-to-head trading in the pocket. I think that would probably be Ball's best chance. Espinosa's, Jesus, he should be fighting at light heavyweight or something ridiculous like that. He's absolutely huge. But, we've seen in different circumstances people fight, like David Hay springs to mind, where he was literally sort of, fighting a giant. And it'd be similar down at a smaller weight. So, his body work, chop away and go forward from that way. So I think Fulton, I've been quite critical over Fulton in the past. I think I'd back Nick Ball to beat him. So yeah, I think Nick Ball could defo unify. I think the Leo fight would be the most interesting one for me in terms of styles, but I don't see why he couldn't beat Espinosa. If he can somehow manage to get inside and chop down at the body, I don't think Espinosa would keep the pace.
Yeah, that's very true. So I think I'd probably have, again, the Leo one is the one I think I'd back Nick Ball to probably favourite in. I think for some reason I still have kind of question marks over Nick Ball's like fluidity. Some people on the channel who are more insightful than me would sit there and say that Nick Ball is a very, very hard worker. but not necessarily has the sort of ability or the fluidity of someone like Stephen Fulton. That'd be a good stylistic mix. And if he didn't necessarily get in and hurt Fulton, I think Fulton could win that on points. Similar with Espinosa, I think Espinosa might be a bit too big for him and possibly beat him as well. But I think also we need to probably see Nick Ball in some sort of tougher fights. I think for me, there's a little bit of question mark over the sort of power of Nick Ball again here. Like he caught obviously Sam Goodman multiple times, didn't seem to really shift him either. So that we're going to talk about those other fights. It seems like I would probably lean towards some of the sort of the silkier sort of styles, and and maybe the sort of percentage punches over Nick Ball in those fights. Just not taking anything away from Nick Ball, very hard worker, good fighter, and Britain's only world champion currently. So we're talking 37 years. The march goes on, Owen. The march goes on. Shout out to the Brexit boys. I'll enjoy that as well. The end of this video. Thank you, Owen, for joining me. As always, guys, like and subscribe to the channel. We'll obviously have other reviews, previews, big fight breakdowns, all that good stuff up and under one roof. But we are there, obviously reacting, sharing our thoughts on Nick Ball's unanimous victory over Sam Goodman, that's just taking place in Ridley. Owen, thanks for joining me, and guys, as always, thank you very much for watching.
Pleasure as always, mate.
I've got to figure out how to stop recording.